Welcome to 28 Days and Beyond, where we reflect on our history, our heritage, our culture, and our own authentic voice. And I'm your host, Alexander Evans, with my co-host, Amari Johnson.
How you doing, man? What's going on?
We're going to talk about sports and entertainment.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to sports and entertainment, from a cultural standpoint, what are some things coming to mind? Who do you see when you hear the word athlete? What image comes to mind? Muhammad Ali.
Yep.
So why you pick a black guy?
Why not? You know what I'm saying? I think Muhammad Ali kind of really embodies everything that is an athlete, right? You've got the sort of physical athleticism, obviously, the strength, the grace, the poise, the sort of the moral side of an athlete, which I think is extremely important, which is why I'm looking forward to today's conversation, right? Who took a moral stance, who actually fought for what he believed in, just like he fought in the ring. And then, of course, he was just cool. You know what I'm saying? He's the greatest of all time. He shook up the world.
Guy,
shook up the world. Yeah.
Well, one of the things I liked about, still do admire about Muhammad Ali is he was willing to sacrifice public favor for what he stood for.
That's what I'm saying.
Regardless of how it's going to impact him from a financial standpoint.
Right.
Where, and it's no burden on today's athletes, to a degree it is, that sometimes we compromise who we are at the expense of making money.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that has been lost. And now you see a lot more advocacy coming from athletes. But one of the things that, when I think of black athletes and some of the stereotypes still exist in the culture, or from a media standpoint, is, what does he exhibit? From a physical standpoint, we get all the accolades, but from a cerebral thinking man's game, we always get tagged with stereotypes.
Yeah, so what do you think about that?
Well, I think that, if it's a representation of whoever that trendsetter is, how come he can't be that model and we take that model from him and let that be the norm, as opposed to looking at who's not the model, and then that becomes a stereotype.
So let's take it from this angle, right? Let's say in an alternate reality, you are the best player in the NFL. What sort of stances would you take? How would you be as an athlete?
Well, I think I would be who I am. But here's the thing. I think you have to establish that and set the premise when you first come in. You can't change up, because then people don't see the authenticity when it comes to that. So whatever premise you set, you have to continue with that on.
But you know what, though? I mean, that doesn't seem like it allows growth for athletes as individuals and as human beings. So, for instance, right, we know in the news right now, a lot of folks are talking about Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah.
Right? And they're like, well, why wasn't you doing this last year, right? Well, the brother can't, observe what's happening around him and sort of grow into that consciousness and take a stand?
Well, I would say with him that we didn't know what he didn't do because they didn't report it. Therefore, we don't know if he took a stance before in other areas, but we can allow the media to educate us, because the thing about media at times is it's not what you tell me, it's what you withhold.
Right.
But you know what we're going to do?
What we're going to do?
We're going to allow, I guess, Enrique Joseph Jr. from NFL Films, when we come back from this, to talk to us about this.
He going to break it down?
Going to break it down.
All right, let's do it.
Out of that protest by Colin Kaepernick, 49ers quarterback knelt instead of standing during the national anthem at last night's game. He was not alone. ABC's Kana Whitworth was there and joins us now from San Diego. Good morning, Kana.
Yeah, George, good morning. One of Colin Kaepernick's teammates joined him in taking a knee, and a Seattle Seahawks player also didn't stand for their national anthem. But this morning, Kaepernick says he's willing to make real change and plans on donating $1 million to charities that he's been working with to help end racial inequality.
We would like to welcome Enrique Joseph Jr. from NFL Films to the set. Welcome.
Thank you.
Enrique, what's the cultural context you grew up in?
So I grew up in Glen Mills, Pennsylvania, right? And Glen Mills, Pennsylvania is demographically, it's a predominantly white area, right? But there is a school called the Glen Mills Schools. Some of you may have heard of it. It is a school for juvenile delinquents. And my father works at the school and has been there for a long time. So I grew up in a place where I grew up in the shadow of this school that deals with inner city young men from all over the country and from other parts of the world as well. So although I grew up in a predominantly white area, I grew up in the shadow of a place that deals with and reforms young African-American men predominantly. So it was interesting to see one thing when I'd go out of my house and would go to the store or would go shopping or whatever, but it's another when I'd step onto the campus. And in the middle of Delaware County, Pennsylvania, you have all these different young men from all over the country that make up the demographic of this school. So it was always interesting to get the perspective of suburban life and then to interact and mingle with these kids who knew nothing about that. So it was an interesting way to grow up.
What kind of connections did you make? At what point did you identify with them, or you know what I mean? How did you?
You can never truly identify with someone who grew up in a world that you will never truly understand.
Okay.
And I understood that early, but they also understood that about me as well. I grew up knowing that these kids had seen things that I will never see, have done things that I will never do. But I also respected the fact that they're still alive. They were trying to better themselves. There's a sense of resiliency that a lot of these students have, especially when they click. You know, when they can get it in their mind that, you know, I can be something else than a gangbanger, than a drug slinger, than, you know, a drug abuser, and apply that same mentality to something positive to create some type of positive change. That is what the Glen Mills Schools is about. And that's what made it a joy to kind of be around those kids when they would start to realize that there's something better out there than going back to whatever hood or whatever block they were from and continue to do the same thing. Because a man that continues to do the same thing eventually goes insane. You know, one person who doesn't make a change, they will self-destruct from the inside out.
How was that intercultural communication between those dynamics? Because how did they view you in that setting, you know, when you interacted with them?
So when I taught there, after I graduated college, I taught video production there.
Okay.
The best thing about that was because I was an African American and the majority of my students were African American, a lot of the counselors or the other teachers are white. So you take kids from the inner city and you match them with guys who are from suburban America who are their superiors, and there's going to be a clash, of course, because there's a misunderstanding in the culture. Being black, being an athlete, understanding sports, music, video, there's already a stronger connection in general. You have to deal with the kids in a certain type of way. You have to reach out in a way to them because they only respond to certain things. They love rap music. They love trap music. All right, so how am I going to get these kids to be interested in video production? Let's show them a few music videos. Let's show them some clips from Star's TV show Power, something that has to do with drugs. Of course, it's not positive, but it draws interest. It's about getting them interested so that they can then take that interest to a whole nother level. I have a student now who's at Lincoln University studying communications and film, and he's doing a fantastic job. But all he did was take the interest that we, you know, kind of got out of him and took it to the next level. So it's all about finding a way to connect with the kids on a much deeper level than just what's on the surface. You know, you kind of have to go and hit home with a lot of those kids.
How were you able to educate your white colleagues and counterparts in understanding that cultural difference? Like you said, you know, they come from parts of the world or parts of the country that's not always conducive to their same world, and then those biases happen. How did you educate both of those entities, which was a complex situation?
Being someone who I consider myself to be well-rounded.
Okay.
I like to take a lot of time to think about and look at a lot of the issues in the world, technology, automobiles, whatever. I'm interested in a lot of different things. I take what I've learned experience-wise from playing sports, from meeting people from different areas, from different countries. I take those experiences and marry them with the experiences that I've had with people from Glen Mills, with the students from Glen Mills, with people from high school. I went to a predominantly white high school. So when you are an African American or any minority and you're placed in a situation where you're the minority, you know, you're almost in a situation that you have to learn how to be extremely clever and maneuver extremely well between different sets of people, between different cliques. And all I did was just took my experiences and I would just sit down and I would talk to them, be like, look, there's a reason why you guys can't get through to these kids. You have to stop looking at it from what you've heard or what you've seen on television. You have to sit down with these kids, you have to talk to them, talk about their families, talk about their brothers, talk about their mothers, call their parents, call their moms, call their dads. It doesn't just end when the day is over at the job, you know. You have to, I don't even work at the school anymore, and I'm still mentoring my former student. I just took him shopping the other day because his shoe game was terrible, you know? So you have to be able to keep working with the kids and getting a deeper understanding of what they know, who they are, who their families are. It's much more important than just, you know, punching in, working, and then punching out and going home.
And how did you get from there to NFL Films?
So that's the million-dollar question, right? I was teaching there video production, and every year we host a career day event at the school. NFL Films has been coming to the school for about 28 years. The senior audio mixer at NFL Films, his first cousin is the athletic director at the school. The video production department is always tasked with setting up the event for NFL Films. They get their own event with the projector and speakers, and the kids go there and they get to do like trivia with some of the producers and stuff. So I went there, I was setting up, and in between the two sessions, I had gone up to one of the mixers and told him that I do voice work and that I'm an aspiring voiceover talent as well as a producer. So the guy said, look, send me a demo and send it to me as soon as you can. So I went directly home, put together some stuff that I had worked on, sent it to him. He's like, all right, I want to get you in to Films a recorded demo. I'm like, okay, great.
Hey, thanks for sharing your story, Enrique. When we get back, we're going to dig a little deeper.
For the land and of the free.
Overnight, San Francisco 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick refusing to stand during the national anthem again. This time, he took a knee right behind hundreds of service members being honored on Military Appreciation Night. As the crowd and players stand, you can see Kaepernick kneeling on the sideline. Teammate Eric Reed joining him.
Going to stand. And he's receiving heavy boos here.
The crowd booing every time he took a snap.
He's entitled to his opinion. We fought for that. I just think he's a jerk.
And now the quarterback sparking new controversy for wearing these socks showing police officers as pigs. Those scandalous socks drawing criticism from law enforcement officials across the country. Police in Vermont tweeting, wealthy, privileged person's free speech dehumanizes an entire group of human beings. Sound familiar, Kaepernick?
We're back with Enrique from NFL Films, and we're going to dig a little deeper. Enrique, one of the things that you talked about was your experience at NFL Films. I think you wanted to.
So where we left off, you were talking about, all right, so they bring you in to do a demo for the voiceover. And then what happened from there?
So the demo was, like it was okay.
Yeah.
You know, I was raw. I didn't have much experience with what they like to do, how they normally do things. So I didn't hear anything for quite a few months. I was really getting frustrated at my job. I was looking for a way out. I applied to 30-something jobs to do production work, to do voice work, to do writing work, whatever. You know, I had a production background. I was like, you know what? I need to get out of here. I need to do something else. I love the kids. I love what I did. It was just other things. So I was talking to my girlfriend one day, and she's like, you know, I saw that the NFL Films had an internship for the producers department. She's like, well, no, why don't you apply? You know somebody. And I was like, yeah, you're right. So I was like, all right. So I applied. I called my guy. Meanwhile, I had been in contact with him over those few months that I hadn't heard anything. I asked him, try to, you know, see if anything had happened, if any new developments. You know, you got to stay on your connects, you know, sometimes. So he was like, look, I know you've been out of school for a little bit. I'll see if you can apply for the internship. Worked out. I applied. I got an interview. The interview went so well that they ended up offering me a job instead of an internship as a producer. So now I'm like, okay, now I'm in as a producer. So I got there. I ran into the producer who ran my demo. He saw that I was working there, and he said hi. He's like, I thought that was you. I thought I saw you the other day. He's like, I wanted to say hello. Kind of just moved from one thing to another. The cool thing about it is when I got there, they started to give me a lot of work. They started having me start doing on-demand video stuff for NFL.com.
Gotcha.
I started editing some pieces together. I started writing some stuff. All right, I did that. Then I moved on to something else. I put together the Road to the Super Bowl piece for the Carolina Panthers. It was me and two other producers. Of course, they lost, so no one will ever see it. But you know, they saw that I could handle the work, which was the best thing about it. From there, I had finished that project. One day, the producer who ran my demo, he approached me and said, look, I need you to come down to the studio. I want to record another demo. So I was given some script, and it was for the previous Super Bowl 49 recap film. I was like, okay. After I did the demo, he was like, look, I want to give you a shot, and you're going to do the Super Bowl 50 recap film.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, I can do that. You know, I was the most nervous person in the building that day. but I knew that I had a job to do. The one producer was one of my supervisors. You know, I'm not going to fold under my supervisor's pressure or anything. You know, nothing like your supervisor giving you a script to direct and everything. So did that. It turned out well. That pretty much opened the door for people to see how I sounded, how I could handle direction, and all of that in the voiceover field is extremely important to be able to take direction well, to be able to give the producers what they're looking for, and then some. The best thing a voiceover talent can do is to have the producer leave the session thinking, he read that line pretty better than I thought that it could have been. So that's kind of where it started, and then from there, I've done the top 100 players of 2016. It aired on the NFL Network. And I actually took that job from Wendell Pierce, the Wire actor.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, very sad way that I got that job. He got arrested for beating a woman at 3:30 in the morning while intoxicated.
Okay.
So the NFL has plenty on their plate with domestic violence and concussions, and they didn't need that. I was at the right place at the right time.
You almost sound like him too.
Yo,
So,
but let's pick up on that, because obviously, right, you got the domestic violence, you've also got the social activism. As somebody who's on the inside, what can you shed on that light? I mean, obviously, you know, a lot of people are talking about Colin Kaepernick and such. What's up, man? What's going on in the NFL?
Well, I'll start with this. Working at NFL Films, which is the production house of what the NFL does, it's not a very diverse place. There's no secret about it. There's no, you know, it's 100% truth. Everyone understands it. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. Of course, it can be better. You know, it can always be better. When it came to the Colin Kaepernick thing, a lot of people had mixed emotions. So I narrate a show for Showtime's Inside the NFL, which is a multi-Emmy award-winning show that's been on since the 60s. And in the beginning of the show, in the first few segments, the Colin Kaepernick event had transpired. One of the pieces talked about making light of the situation. So as the narrator, my job is to move the story along. And when I read that, you know, I wasn't mad or anything like that. I was more so interested, only because the NFL Films has a duty to not choose a side. And that is because we represent the league, we represent the Shield, we represent the owners, and people forget that the owners of the 32 NFL teams own the NFL as a whole. So we can't talk ill against the owners. We can't pick a stance that may make us look bad. So how do we move and talk about a topic that is, in a way, dividing our country, right? So with what Kaepernick did, people thought it was distasteful. People have talked on the job about it, how they felt about it, how they felt that he did it, whether they thought it was right or wrong, and whether he was right or wrong, it was still his right to do so. Everyone has that First Amendment right to express their freedom of speech. You know, people go overseas to fight for our freedom to do those types of things. And in the history of activism, of social activism, of civil rights activism, what or when has there ever been a peaceful protest that was acceptable?
Interesting.
You know, and that goes back to, you know, to Martin Luther King's March on Washington, whether it was the 4 young girls that were blown up in the South back in the 60s. We could talk about this all day long, but it was never really an acceptable thing. But at the end of the day, Colin Kaepernick's goal was to move the conversation along. Whether you agree, whether you disagree, that is exactly what happened. So
if I can ask you to step outside the role as an employee of NFL Films,
Sure.
for yourself, what do you think the role of social activism is in sports, if any?
I think that it's important to use whatever platform you can to get any type of positive message out. Let's go back to basketball, right? At the ESPYs 2 years ago, it was either 2 or 3 years ago, Carmelo Anthony, LeBron James, Chris Paul, and Dwayne Wade stood on the stage at the ESPYs and promoted a peaceful protest, social activism, social awareness. They talked about the Mike Brown, they talked about Freddie Gray, they talked about unarmed African-American men being shot and killed. Nobody had anything to say about that. Why? Why is it so much different from those 4 NBA basketball players on that stage, on that platform, versus Colin Kaepernick?
Yeah.
But the fact that it had to deal with the American flag, what the American flag represents. But I do believe that the flag means different things to different people.
So what we're going to do is we're going to go to a clip that deals with social activism at this moment.
The socks that were worn, did those not seem negative?
No, that was once again, we have cops that are murdering people. We have cops in the SFPD that are blatantly racist. And those issues need to be addressed.
Players from other teams like Jeremy Lane from Seattle are joining Kaepernick in his seated stand, begging the question, how far will this go?
At this point, I think it will continue to be taking a knee. As far as how long this goes, I'm not sure.
I asked Kaepernick if he plans on taking up the San Francisco Police Association on their invite to visit the academy, and he says yes, adding that he's concerned about racism within the department, saying that some bad cops are giving all cops a bad name. Amy.
All right, Kana, thank you.
Wow, what a clip. Let's talk about what we just saw. Why is it when, I'm gonna just call it what it is, how come when black people protest, it's a third real issue, and people forget Colin Kaepernick was raised by white parents. Why do you think that's such a big issue?
I think it's a big issue because we make it a big issue. I think the media makes it a big issue. You know, I'm not trying to point fingers, but I understand what the media's job is. If you work in media with any particular genre, you know that there is a specific agenda. You know, news, they have their own agenda. They know that they will generate ratings. They know that they'll get people talking. They know they'll get people angry. They know that they have the ability to swing people's decisions on how they perceive other people. It's nothing but stereotypes put on a massive scale. And the way that Kaepernick has gone about his protest, although it's been peaceful, and I haven't had a particular problem with what he's done, people will have a problem with that. But then again, that's kind of what makes America great in the first place, right? It's the ability to, you have your opinion, I have my opinion, you have your opinion. The problem is when we act as if you don't have the right to do so. You know, that's what our country was kind of founded on, was the ability to have equal rights, specific rights, freedom, equality. This is what we've been preaching, what we learn, what's in our Constitution, what makes up the first 10 amendments of the United States, our Bill of Rights. It talks about the freedoms that we are awarded to be citizens of this country. So do I have issues with some of the things that he's done and some of the ways that he's gone about it? Absolutely. But I also agree that it's a peaceful protest. He hasn't hurted anybody. He may have offended police officers, but I'm the type of person that believes in people. I believe in good people. I believe that there is good in this world. I'm a man of faith. So I believe that people have a very good conscience. I believe that people who are ignorant have a misunderstanding. I wish that we would come to an understanding. I wish we could sit down and talk about a lot of these issues. I wish that some police officers would get up in front of the camera and say, look, we are afraid of certain black people that live in inner cities, because it's the truth. I worked at a place where I saw these same kids from these inner cities that give cops this sense of being afraid. So I understand that there is a misunderstanding. What we need to do as a nation to come together to heal is to sit down and talk about it. You know, that's what democracy is all about, is taking your perspective, my perspective, although they are different, and coming to some type of conclusion that can make us a better place for you and I. So we're kind of losing sight of that.
Yeah, and you know, you losing sight. He says that part of his goal is to call attention to larger issues, which unfortunately are not being addressed because everybody's so caught up in, you know, the messenger as opposed to the message. I think a great point that he made was, you know, folks are so upset about his socks, but nobody's upset about the black men and women who are being killed in the streets, right? I mean, he's one person wearing, you know, some cloth on his feet as opposed to what is happening with regularity, right, in cities all over the country. And where's the sort of the white outrage over the killing of black men that would even become equal to the white outrage at Colin Kaepernick for deciding to express himself in that particular way, which, as you said, is not hurting anybody directly, at least not physically, right?
Yeah,
Right.
I think it's fantastic misdirection.
Enrique, we thank you for coming to the set and really talking about this difficult subject and your expertise, your insider-outsider perspective on how to deal with this issue. And you know what? This is why we do 28 Days and Beyond, where we reflect on our history and our culture and our own authentic voice, where we control the narrative and other people don't speak for us. We ask you to tune in once again, and thank you.